Jai Hind, friends. Today I'm going to share the story of a young man diagnosed with autism. As a child, he struggled with social interactions, sensory sensitivities, and communication challenges. His parents enrolled him in an inclusive school where he discovered his love for art. His drawings were intricate and mesmerizing. While other kids played sports, he created entire word on paper. One day, his teacher noticed his talent and encouraged him to participate in an art competition, which he hesitatingly agreed to. To everyone's surprise, he won the first prize. Today, expression through art has become his superpower. It allowed him to express emotions he couldn't convey verbally. His journey from feeling isolated to being celebrated for his creativity is a testament to resilience and the beauty of neurodiversity. Yes, you guessed it right. Today we are going to touch upon the sensitive subject of ADHD and autism. I'm today fortunate to have an expert who has spent a whole lot of time talking about and researching about a topic which is so dear to us. In fact, allow me to introduce and this expert, Roopa Belur, an exceptional autism and consultant with over 2 decades of experience. She has dedicated her career to supporting children, adolescents, and adults diagnosed with ADHD and autism. In fact, she holds a degree in sociology, economics, and a master's degree in psychology. Her early journey focused on school consultation, psychological testing, assessments, diagnosis, life training skills, and behavior management plans for individuals on autism spectrum and other developmental disorders. In fact, she researched and enriched her clinical experience, emphasizing evidence based practices, community based supports, and interventions, and develops personalized behavior plans for individuals with various developmental disabilities, including autism spectrum disorder, ADHD, genetic disorders, and so much and so more. She also provides training on behavior management strategies and transition planning. In fact, Rupa has presented autism and practical behavior strategies at workshops and conferences across the globe. She advocates for flexibility in accommodating individuals with ADHD and autism within educational settings and organization. Rupa's primary goal is to ensure that individuals with autism spectrum disorder and other developmental disabilities lead meaningful and productive lives. She emphasizes shared understanding, recognizing everyone's uniqueness, and celebrating diversity. Rupa, we feel so fortunate to have you with us on this show. Welcome to Buland Honsle.
Thank you so much, Tarun. That was a very warm introduction, and it's an absolute pleasure to be with you here today.
In fact, the pleasure is all ours because we have such an expert and you are doing phenomenal work. So I'll come down to the subject proper that we wish to introduce to our audience today. People know about autism, ADHD, and all those things, but they get covered under a broad spectrum called neurodiversity. So tell us about how do you approach neurodiversity, particularly when working with individuals diagnosed with ADHD and autism.
Yeah, Tarun, before I even jump into neurodiversity, I often think of biodiversity, which is a term most of us are fairly familiar with. We learn this
Mhm.
growing up in schools or college. And biodiversity is really, it's a variety of living things and how they interact with each other, right? So if I were to translate that concept into neurodiversity, I think of neurodiversity as different ways of thinking, different people having different level of cognitive function, different skills, abilities, strengths, just like all of us. I'm not like my sister. My sister is not like me.
Mhm.
We're fairly diverse with different functionalities, and I just think of neurodiversity as a different way of thinking.
Okay. So, could you share examples of personalized strategies you have developed for different clients based on their unique strengths and needs?
Yeah, and that's a good question, Tarun. Also, a fairly broad question.
Mhm.
Everything is individualized based on the needs of the child that I'm working with, especially if you're talking about a school scenario, right? So, one story that I particularly have in mind that I think is a fairly powerful one, I hope it's a powerful one, is a lot of my folks who are neurodiverse, they get bullied in school. And it's because the teacher is saying, hey, make a presentation to the class, talk about this science project, or recite this poetry to the entire class. And that is often quite difficult for people with autism or ADHD. And I'm not saying it's 100%, but I would say the larger majority find that challenging.
Yeah.
So they get sidelined. That leads to bullying. That leads to things like, Rahul looks different or Radha seems awkward, all sorts of labeling, right? So, one strategy that I developed is what is it? I took different computers. I took an Apple computer, I took a Microsoft computer, I took a whole lot of wires to a classroom, and I told the entire class, help me connect this to the smart board that's behind me. And a lot of kids raised their hands and they said, I'll do it, Rupa, I can do this, but none of them could connect it. So to me, before we even think of strategies, I think of how can we create an understanding of the why people are different. So that's when the students in the class, including the teachers, they realize that, oh, wait, Apple is a different operating system. Microsoft is a different operating system. So that's the concept that I use to talk to the classroom and say, that's how we're all different. And maybe if you're talking about, I'm just going to use Rahul as a random example. That's why Rahul thinks differently. He may not be really interested in playing sports. He may think differently. He may need a little more quiet time. So that's, in my opinion, a good way to internalize, understand, and create that education within the school atmosphere, teachers, peer group.
I think that's a perfect example of connecting with the students when you have something which they can relate to, that how these two operating systems work differently. And similarly, we as human beings do the same. So, in your experience, how crucial is collaboration between educators, families, and other professionals in supporting neurodivergent individuals?
You used the right word, Tarun. You used the word crucial. And if I could magnify crucial into the word to the power of 100 or 300, that's how crucial it is. Um, it is like the core of that support system to answer your question. So that would be the educators, classroom teachers. Definitely, parents play a very, very big role. Again, I work in Canada, but I'm trying to think of the Indian context as I'm learning a little more about universities, colleges,
Mhm.
schools here as well. Is this a counselor? There's a psychologist. So that collaboration is very important because the teacher may have a certain idea of the way the child behaves. The parent may see something, those behaviors or challenges presented differently in the house. So we have to be mindful that the child or the student is also working around the environment and the atmosphere, right? So
Yes.
that collaboration, I think, is supremely important. That could mean for a young child having a agenda or a book like a communication book that says today Radha had a good day. She was able to participate in this certain challenges, but there are possibly ways to overwork it. Similarly, I think it is important for a parent to also communicate. For example, again, if I can put throw in a story here. Recently, I met with a parent who spoke about the challenges that they undergo every morning to get their child ready before they put the child into the school bus, right?
Mhm. Yes.
Waking up, then transitioning from brushing the teeth, children with autism, a lot of them have sensory difficulties. So that may take 20 minutes longer, then breakfast, then
Yes.
changing the clothes, maybe being in the bus and listening to all the extra noise from other children. So this is the invisible aspect that the teacher doesn't even know what to expect when the child's walking into the classroom. And what they're seeing is a child who's upset. But there's a whole story behind why the child is upset as they're walking into the classroom, because there were perhaps too many transitions. Maybe the bus was too noisy. Maybe a child is sitting too close to them and it irritates them, right? So that collaboration and communication and understanding of the child's needs between different providers is supremely important. I can't even, I can go on and on all day about the benefits of that,
Yes.
Tarun.
No, I think what you are bringing about is we must understand the journey. In the army, we used to be, when we got commissioned, we were made to stay with the soldiers just to understand that how such a large body of troops gets ready for PT. And you must have that
Right.
empathy just to understand that when 250 odd boys, they have their almost everything being done together. If somebody gets late, so what steps you can take rather than punishing them for it?
You said that beautifully, Tarun. What are the steps that we can take?
We can
And
take. Yes,
understanding is so much better than consequences, right? Which honestly
absolutely.
doesn't go a long way. Yeah,
So
that's a
people
really
are
good
people are very
analogy.
judgmental, Rupa. They would pass broad comments and wider things about parents were not there or they got late and all those things, least realizing that this particular child has a problem holding his toothbrush, probably uh, trying to do the things which a normal child would do in much faster time frame, and yet they have to
Absolutely.
be going through that process.
Absolutely, right? So, yeah, and that's a good analogy, Tarun.
So, what steps do you take to advocate for better inclusion and understanding of ADHD and autism within educational institutions and organizations?
Yeah, the journey is very different based on, the type of school, the level of acceptance. So my step one is kind of like similar to the example I gave you with the two different operating systems. Um, you know, uh, I have also done workshops where I have gone into a school. People with autism, ADHD, largely from what they've taught me, Tarun, are very visual. You give them a whole lot of verbal instructions, do this, do that. It's like me telling you, Tarun, so tomorrow come here on at 2 o'clock and 3 o'clock we'll do this, 4 o'clock we submit the science assignment, 5 o'clock. Too much, right? So one way to support that is, can we simplify that and make it visual? Can we communicate that through an extra email or a checklist? Keep it very simple. That way it's concrete, it's black and white, as opposed to all that 100 words. So a strategy that I have used is, for example, I've basically put a picture of two washrooms where I haven't labeled men or women. When you go to a public washroom, you see a picture of a woman, man, or something like that. You understand what to do. Or think of an airport scenario, you have directions. If you were in a country that you don't understand the language, you're banking on visuals, right? So I have used that analogy where I've kind of simulated like an airport scenario, but I've not used any proper visuals. And I've kind of told my audience, could be teachers, principal, staff, that what would you do? How would you navigate in a country that you're completely unaware of the language and you don't know how to read what's written, right? And it's confusing. So the words I get is, I get confused. I don't know. I may get scared. I may, look out for help, hoping that somebody will come and help me because I don't have the tools to ask for help. So I use these internalization exercises to help them understand that's how somebody with autism or ADHD is perhaps feeling when there are too many instructions. What can
Yes.
you do to simplify it? Can you supplement it with a visual checklist, a simple email, maybe 10 minutes after school, where you take the child and say, what did you think? Did something make you stressful today? How can I simplify this or help you, right? The child will feel really supported. That simple language or a sentence like, how can I help you, can go a long way.
I think that's a very powerful statement. Just by saying that, how can I help you, opens up so many doors.
Yeah, and just removes that isolation, Tarun, because
Absolutely.
they're already feeling isolated amidst 30 kids or 80 kids, or not knowing how to easily
Yes.
navigate, right? So, yeah, I can go on all day about strategies, but I think as we think about strategies, it's important for people to say, oh, I get it, why I need to employ this.
Yes. At the end of the day, they need to feel convinced that why they are doing what they are doing.
Exactly.
So how do you measure,
Exactly.
yeah, how do you measure the effectiveness of your interventions? What outcomes do you consider as indicators of progress?
That's a question that everybody is going to give you a different answer, especially coming from my capacity, Tarun.
Mhm.
So the classic school version is, behavioral measurements sheets, which is kind of where I started my journey 20 years ago. But as I've evolved and as everybody, like my clients or my neurodiverse individuals, they're my best teachers. They've constantly taught me
Mhm.
what is a safer approach. And I have kind of gone away from those tracking sheets. People typically use tracking sheets. So this is Tarun's baseline behavioral challenges,
Yes.
20 days of interventions. What is it looking like on the 27th of April for Tarun, right? That's in a classic way to answer your question. But my approach is slightly different as I've grown into this field, is I'm looking at, okay, the child is feeling really confused because it's too crowded when he walks into the school, right? If you think of even your school, Tarun, bell rings, the doors open, there's a whole flock of children
Yes.
entering the school, and to a child that's neurodiverse, there are people bumping into them, then they have to go to their locker, open it, stand in a line, go to their class, maybe too much. So one way I can measure how can I prevent that anxiety or reduce the anxiety is I would look at the child entering the school either before all the kids come in or maybe after everybody
After.
comes and settles down. So you're very naturally kind of preventing that hallway hustle, the sounds of the chair scrapping or the books falling and the
Absolutely.
announcements, right? So to me, to answer your question, the measurement would be maybe the child is just way more regulated.
Mhm.
He or she may seem way more calmer during that first mathematics class compared to sitting with the ears closed or not being able to pay attention. So you've already removed a stressor, which means I'm able to
Yes.
participate
Absolutely.
a little more, right? So
Yeah.
that's how I measure, is more it's subjective, but
Mhm.
I think that the child is really our best educator. They will teach us what is working better as we employ these measures in the
Yeah,
classroom.
we can observe them that how comfortable they are feeling. Probably they are not showing any signs of anxiety or they are not
Right.
ruffled by that kind of thing. And if they have that kind of a smooth entry, the rest of the journey also becomes equally smooth.
Right, right, absolutely. Yeah. So it is subjective. I've really strayed away from those measurement tools and checklists and what does Tarun look like on each day. But I find this a safer approach. Those behavioral checklists kind of, the word sometimes that behavior turns into a negative connotation. This gives it a little more of a positive approach to say, hey, there is acceptance through accommodations, right? And I find that
Yes.
way more safer for the child.
I think that's a very beautiful term. And that's a very beautiful approach about people not being judged on a matrix or on some statistical charts, how they behaved yesterday or how they were observed, but on their overall acceptance in a particular ecosystem.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Can you can you share any heartwarming success stories or instances where your work significantly improved someone's quality of life?
Yeah. Again, there's so many children. I work in workplaces and as well as schools. I think some things that stand out to me, Tarun, is as a child or student individual is transitioning from that high school into university journey. It's a very difficult transition. Again, to many people it's seamless, just like that brushing the teeth example that you
Mm.
also were talking about, how it's so easy for a kid to just brush their teeth and move on. That transition is very, very difficult. You have to apply, you have to navigate. It's a broad world. So yeah, a success story that I can think of is the amount of advocacy we worked for an individual who was transitioning from high school into undergraduation, right? Like that, the building is big, the teachers, you have to kind of navigate on your own. So we did a lot of work with educating teachers. I took him to the university for about a month every day for 10 minutes to get a feel of what does my classroom look like? Who are my
My
teachers?
teachers.
When I get stressed, this is the room that I go to. So essentially, what we're doing through this journey is not just overnight exposing this individual to this broad world that can be very scary to navigate, right? And that transition, we reduce some of those anxieties by creating a plan, by slowly acclimatizing
Great.
this individual to the new environment. And again, I think another thing that we created for this individual was a safety toolkit, which is a list of things that I can do when I get anxious.
Okay.
Right. This is, I can go to Miss Sheila when I'm upset. This is a safe place for me.
Yes.
Another thing that to me, this is a success story too, for the child more than me, Tarun, is I had this individual talk to his entire class about how he functions, how he views the world around him, not from abnormal, not from the lens of disorder, from the lens of diversity. I'm different.
I'm different.
And what
Yes.
and what that did, Tarun, was it reduced bullying, it got him friendships, there was a sense of acceptance. And what he spoke front of the class, which was a lot of work for him, it's not easy for him to face a class of 20 people, but it was his story and his journey, and that made the world of a difference
It
to
would it would have been some sort of an icebreaker because children of that particular thing, when they see a certain thing, no, which we perceive as not normal,
right.
so they are also wary of that particular thing or that particular
Absolutely.
individual. So it is how our defense mechanism works.
Mhm.
And the communication that happens is actually working in removing these obstacles and barriers that we are perceiving about each other.
Exactly. Exactly. And to give the benefit of doubt to students, they also are unaware, right? Like a typical classroom of 30. And this helps bridge that gap and the unknown and see what is behind those curtains, right? That we
Yeah,
cannot visibly see, because everything is not visible when it comes to
absolutely. Yes.
neurodiversity. So,
And
yeah.
making students at such impressionable age aware of that you would encounter such people and they would also grow like you would be growing, and you should have a certain amount of empathy towards them because that's why we call them as differently abled.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah.
So what specific accommodations do you recommend for students with ADHD and autism in schools? How can teachers create a more supportive learning environment? How can educational institutions foster a culture of acceptance and flexibility?
You nailed it with the word flexibility, Tarun. So, I've kind of summarized some parts of what I'm going to answer with this question. I think the key thing is awareness for the
Mm.
teachers, the support system, the staff. And, it goes back to your question about collaboration.
Yes.
With strategies, how can we facilitate accommodations? Many individuals like routines. They do not like change in routines.
Mm.
So again, an example that I can think of is some of my students like to sit in that specific spot in the class. It has to be that spot. They do not like changes, right? But then you have classroom activities where we disperse the class and say, okay, group A sit here, group B, group C, group D, discuss. And for that individual, that's a threatening day.
Right.
It's like a
Yes.
change in routine. I have to move away. I have to interact with somebody I don't know. So, what can we do to work around it? Can that group go around this boy? If Rahul is scared to go, can the group work around him, right? And too many of, something I see commonly with young children is when they form a line, they always like to be in the beginning or the end of the line. And, teachers always want to do things like, no, but you have to learn to change, you have to learn to adapt. I think the teachers need to
Need to.
learn to say it's okay
It's a,
that this child, it's a small thing, it is important, it's predictable for the child, it's routine, it's what I know how to expect, and let's work with it. So, my theory is let's work with the child and their needs instead of saying you fit into my world or my ecosystem, right? They
absolutely.
also are trying. It's not that they don't want to, but some things are very confusing. So, routines are important. We spoke about checklists,
Yes.
just that additional time to spend that quality time with the child, and maybe like a quiet corner. Um, if the anxiety is really high, what I've done in some schools is they are able to walk into another space where they can read their favorite comic, maybe just play Lego, listen to music, just kind of calm themselves down when they feel anxious, and then they go back to the classroom. We're just giving them an opportunity to say,
Opportunity. Yeah.
I can be safe. So those are some examples I can think of.
Absolutely. I think it is equally important for the teachers to exhibit that certain amount of empathy and understanding, probably maturity, that these
Right,
children need to be treated in a different manner because they are grappling with much more of uncertainty than the normal
right,
children.
right.
What
Yeah.
are some of the challenges you face in your work and how do you overcome them?
Lots of challenges, Tarun, but it's okay. I think that's what keeps us going, and that advocacy never ends, right? I when I talk about challenges, I just want to be very respectful that everybody is really trying their best. It
Yes.
is, neurodiversity is something that is always not visible to the naked eye. It's hard. Many people mask, they camouflage, which is very common, something that we see in neurodiverse individuals, because they're also just trying to say, okay, I want to navigate this world. How do I fit in? What do I do?
Yes.
Because it's a pretty tricky world out there, right? So, challenges are that sense of acceptance, that, the child needs accommodations. I think the biggest challenge I face is, oh, Tarun has an IQ of 120 or 130. Why does he need accommodations? He gets 100 on math, he gets a 95 on science, and you're telling me, I need to send him home 10 minutes early before the
Early.
school
Yeah.
rings, right? School bell rings. So that's, I think people find it very difficult to put that two and two together. Tarun, when there's so much intelligence, why does somebody need accommodations? That level of understanding or placing that together, which is nobody's fault, really. It's not about finding fault with the teachers or the system. It is something that people find hard. And crossing that path takes a lot of work
Lot of work.
and a lot of effort. And I think it's important for practitioners to not give up, and not brand teachers as they don't want to understand. Instead, think of what can I do to create that awareness
Great.
and help
Yes.
them, uh, you know, fill that vacuum, right? So that's, to me, the biggest challenge that I have faced.
Okay. Now, the other thing that I would like to ask you is what changes or advancements would you like to see in the field of neurodiversity support?
Again, I can take like weeks together to answer this question. Tarun, we are there. It's happening. It's happening in small steps. I just jumped into a LinkedIn group conversation a few days ago that spoke about neurodiversity in India. It was a great I don't know if I have to call it a conference or a seminar, but some leading psychologists, school counselors were present, and there were some great conversations about acceptance and awareness. And I think we need multitude of this, and not just in cities like Delhi, Bombay, Bangalore, or bigger cities. We need those conversations to really spread, and it takes time. It's not easy. So I think that that's the change will come with awareness. The change will come with acceptance
Acceptance.
through that awareness. And in terms of what would I like to see, is them. There's so many strengths in everybody, and everybody has the room to flourish, just like you and me and
Mm.
everybody. And we want to give them the opportunity to flourish by making minor accommodations, whether it's in an IT company or in a classroom or in a play school or a daycare. It doesn't matter where, right? But let's give them that opportunity to flourish and not constantly run behind um, things that Tarun cannot do or Roopa cannot do, because we all have a list of things that we cannot do.
I think that was a good reminder and probably a wake up call to most of us when we are dealing with people who are differently abled, who are special, or whom we have to treat in a certain manner, that we are mature enough to understand that their needs are not divergent, but because of their conditions, we have to accept them in a certain manner and give them that much of elbow space so that
Right.
they can gel well in the environment and be part of the same ecosystem, because this is where growth is happening. This is where they'll feel welcomed. This is where they will actually grow, and not
Absolutely.
without the support of other people who are in this ecosystem. Rupa, it was really fantastic knowing your views, insights, and experiences on this particular subject, which was
Mhm.
quite diverse and at the same time to the point. I thank you for being so crisp and clear.
Thank
Before
you,
we let
Tarun.
our guest go, we do not let them go without asking them in a typical military fashion a rapid fire question. So I'm going to ask you three questions in quick succession.
Okay.
And the reason is that we want to keep the interest of our audiences alive. How can parents and educators best support neurodivergent children?
Um, Understand them, ask them, how can I help you? Create a safety net for them, really. I think the most important thing is, just like you want to feel safe when you worked in the army or during your training. I want to feel safe when I walk into that organization. Create a safe space, create safe conversations, and that sense of acceptance that comes with that, Tarun.
Absolutely. There has to be a circle of safety where parents are comfortable sending their students or children to the school or to whichever place. And similarly, the people, those who are managing, they should also feel safe and secure that they are well equipped to handle these situations.
Absolutely.
Is everyone with ADHD hyperactive?
No, definitely not. So with ADHD, you can have you will get the diagnosis as ADHD, but there is it could be predominant inattention, which means your symptoms are more the inattention type, or
Mhm.
it could be predominantly that you only have more hyperactive symptoms, or you could have both. And something to also think about hyperactivity, Tarun, is it's always not like running, climbing on the walls, or jumping. That's so sometimes people have this notion about hyperactivity. It's also that internal hyperactive brain that's so hard to
Yes.
shut down, right? But not everybody diagnosed with ADHD has to have a hyperactivity component. You could, or you could not.
And as we are debunking certain myths about ADHD and autism or the autism spectrum disorder, my final question to you, Rupa, is do people with autism lack empathy?
Absolutely not, Tarun. Whether it's somebody with autism or whether it's Rupa and Tarun or 100 other people, everybody has capacity for empathy. In fact, if I can be super honest, I think some of the most empathetic people I have met in my life are neurodiverse people. And that's not to minimize people who are not neurodiverse. Everybody has a big heart and, kindness and gratitude in them. But there is a lot of empathy, and I'm really glad you asked this question, because I do hear that quite a bit in my workspace as well, and I can very confidently say that they have empathy.
In fact, Rupa, before I come to the close of our podcast, I would like to share that even in the army, we used to have Asha schools. Asha
Hmm.
is a ray of hope. Asha, it's a Hindi word. And the
Yeah,
reason why we call them as Asha schools is because, firstly, if you want a soldier to concentrate on his job and they have a child who's suffering from this kind of a disorder, or this, he's part of this spectrum, how
right,
do they provide them an environment, a place, because it is something which is going to stay with them for the rest of their lives. Some people will get
right,
better, but some people, they would require management.
right,
And army as an organization has created these kind of schools in peace stations. Peace stations means basically not in the border areas or where we are defending the borders, but in safer locations where there are adequate opportunities available, where there is staff available, and where soldiers can come, bring their families, and provide this kind of children. I would certainly love to have a person of your repute, your experience getting connected to, like you were talking about this conference, online conference that you had on
hmm,
neurodiversity, where people from the military who are managing these schools can get
right,
incorporated and probably benefit out of it, because this is one big challenge I have seen people struggling with.
right.
When I was
Yeah,
commanding my battalion, my second in command was posted to me because he had a child who was suffering from this particular autism
right,
spectrum disorder.
right.
And we
Yeah.
had a school in the station.
Hmm.
And I have seen the troubles that parents go through, the kind of mindset they have, and most importantly, if I have to summarize this entire conversation, he used to say, "Sir, as long as we are there, we are looking after them. At times, me and my wife, we think about it. Who will look after them when we are no longer there?" So
Tarun, that
we,
was so important that you brought that up, and very commonly I hear that, and it's really hard because I'm a parent too, and I often think of what happens right after we are gone. It's such a
absolutely.
biological mama bear instinct or papa bear instinct for everybody. So it is so true. What I would summarize all the parents who are working so hard, Tarun, is they're all heroes without capes. They're true
Yes.
Supermans and
Hmm.
many, many more names that we can attribute, but they're true heroes without capes.
Yes. So thank you, Rupa. After having such an interesting conversation, I have only one thing to say, that her expertise extends beyond clinical practice that we got exposed to. It encompasses advocacy, collaboration, and a profound commitment to fostering inclusion. Her work positively impacts the lives of those she serves, making her an invaluable asset in the field of neurodiversity. Dear listeners, thank you for joining us today on Buland Honsle. As we wrap up this enlightening conversation with Roopa Belur, I'm truly inspired by her unwavering commitment to the field of neurodiversity. Rupa's expertise, compassion, dedication have touched countless lives, and her impact reverberates far beyond the confines of a discussion. We could only briefly touch upon that. There was so much she could have shared with us. It is not because of the paucity of time, but there is so much to share. And we wanted it to be a very precise and a telling commentary on that how we should handle children with special needs, especially not only children, but adults who come into this autism spectrum disorder. Rupa, your work is nothing short of exemplary. Your collaborative approach, personalized strategies, and advocacy for inclusion are shaping a more compassionate and understanding society. Our listeners would have surely benefited a lot today. For those who wish to connect with Rupa or learn more about her work, you can find her social media handles in the podcast description. Remember, dear listeners, that understanding and embracing neurodiversity enriches us all. Let's continue to learn, advocate, and create a more inclusive world together. Until next time, stay curious, stay compassionate, and don't forget to subscribe Buland Honsle. Thank you, Rupa, for being such a wonderful guest and sharing your insights, experience, and all the word of knowledge that our listeners would immensely benefit from.
Tarun, thank you so much for the kind words. You're very kind. Thanks a lot.